You remember which was? I think it's 29. Verse 29. Second chapter, verse 29.
I think 29 too.
Avyakta adini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nityana yeva tatraka paridevanaha. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul, and the other not believing in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet even if, for argument's sake, we accept this atheistic theory, there's still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of non-manifestation comes manifestation, just as from ether, air is generated, from air, fire is generated, from fire, water is generated, and from water, earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. Take, for example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation either in the stage of manifestation or in unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle are they manifested, and this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, antavanta ime deha, but that the soul is eternal, nityasyukta saririnaha, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king. But when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for the loss of the body. So this is a philosophical explanation aimed at eliminating lamentation. Why? Because when a person begins to lament, they become incapable of making decisions, they become incapable of acting decisively, and basically they get paralyzed psychologically and physically. So in the case of Arjuna, who's a warrior, that is lethal. That is a deadly formula for a fighter to become incapacitated due to lamentation. I remember when my father died, my mother, I think she cried for 1 week, every day, and it was like, I was only 10 years old. I didn't understand why she was crying so much, because I didn't understand, the death. But here Krishna is making an argument for Arjuna to stop his lamentation, because when a person begins to lament, they can't hear properly. they can't think properly. They're so obsessed with their lamentation. So whether one believes that the soul is eternal and the body is temporary, so when the material body dies, the gross material body, the soul continues to live. It exists before birth, in the body, and after death. Or if you believe that there is no soul, and there's only matter, and you understand the conservation of energy and matter, then there's no reason to lament either. Because if you think the body is just made of matter, and matter is never destroyed, it just transforms from matter to energy, and there's conservation of energy, so therefore there's no reason to lament, nothing is lost. So either way, Krishna is trying to make the argument to Arjuna that this lamentation is not befitting you. You are supposed to be a warrior. There's a battle, they're on the battlefield, the battle's going to start very soon, and here he's lamenting. And Krishna refers to this as Anarya Justam. If we look at the second chapter, in verse number 2, in which Krishna says, Kutas tva kasmalam idam vishame samapastitam Anarya Justam Aisvaryam Akirtikaram Arjuna. So we already read this, and he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy. So when he says impurities, he's referring to Anarya Justam. These impurities are things that are practiced by lower class people who do not know the value of life. And therefore, Anarya comes from the word Aryan, or as we say in English, Aryan. The German definition, understanding, or the Nazi definition of Aryan, is different than the original Sanskrit understanding of the word. Hitler gave a physical, characteristic definition of the word Aryan, like Aryan nation or Aryan people. But he borrowed that word from Sanskrit. The word is Aryan. And here Krishna is saying Anaryan, which means not Aryan. Aryan civilization is a civilization in which the whole purpose and direction of civilization is to lead people to liberation from the cycle of birth and death so that they can go back to the spiritual world. In other words, it's a spiritually oriented civilization. Anarya is a civilization in which those principles that will lead people to freedom from birth, death, old age, and disease, and to entrance into the spiritual world are denied. So one symptom of an Anarya is this lamentation, because it basically paralyzes a person from rationally thinking and being focused on what the purpose of life is. Okay. So there's a statement here, and let's discuss this. It says, the Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. What does that mean? Want to try?
Can you repeat it?
Yeah. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Okay, explain for us what self-realization is. Remember we discussed that in our classes? Different stages, different levels of meaning.
It's like realizing like the things like that lamenting is not necessary and stuff.
Okay, that's not the answer to the question, but remember we said there's 3 levels of self-realization. First level is understanding the difference between the body,
Oh, the body and soul.
yes, and second is understanding the difference between
The soul and Paramatma.
exactly right. And third state is to understand that the material creation, the individual soul, the Paramatma, super soul, all come from
Krishna.
yes. So those are the 3 levels of self-realization. Ultimately, when you understand yourself in relation to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then you become fully self-realized. Right?
Okay.
So here it's saying the Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization, and we just explained what that is, right? On the basis of the non-existence of the material body. What does that mean? Anybody? Okay, the question is, does your body exist?
Yes.
Yeah, right now, yes.
And how about later on?
It will be manifested again.
Well, okay, so when he's saying non-existence, he's referring back to 2nd chapter, verse number 16. Let's take a look at it. Nasato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sada, ubayora vidyastanatas, tvaneos tatvadarsivi. It says, those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. All right? So, he already explained the non-existence of the material body. That means that in Sanskrit there's sat and asat. Sat means what
Existing.
is never destroyed, right?
Destroyed.
And asat means it's easily destroyed,
Temporary.
right? So the body is temporary, and it's always changing. And eventually it'll disappear, meaning the matter is transformed back into energy. Right? So it is never really lost. Why? Because the material nature is eternal, but it goes through 2 stages, manifest and unmanifest. So even in its unmanifest state, it's still existing. It goes into a potential energy state. So, the Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. In the material concept of life, people think that the body is the real identity of the person. And this is especially in the Abrahamic religions, meaning Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A very great importance is given to the body. Therefore, they build elaborate cemeteries to preserve the body, because they believe that sometime Jesus will come back in Christianity for the second coming of Jesus, or the Mahdi in Islam, or in Judaism the name is I forget the name. Anyway, so they're waiting for this final judgment, and in order to be judged finally, all the dead people are resurrected from their graves, and there's a final judgment. So therefore, cemeteries are important. But in Hinduism, there's no cemetery. Why?
Because
get
they
burned.
understood
Because
Don't be in bird.
body
Yeah.
is
The desire for the soul, that there should be a death and desire.
No,
for
because
coming
there's a
back.
difference between the body and the soul.
soul, yeah.
But in the Abrahamic religions, there's sort of an admixture of the two. Right? In other words, if you have no body, then how can you resurrect from the dead? Right? So if your body has not been preserved, or at least in a coffin and protected, how can it resurrect? You say. So if you burn the body in Christianity or Islam or Judaism, it's sacrilegious. But in Krishna consciousness, as it says here, that the Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. It doesn't mean that right now the body doesn't exist, but it's temporary. Therefore, existence and non-existence is in terms of sat and asat. What is never destroyable, what is eternally existent, is the soul. And the body is something that only has a temporary existence. The energy of the body is eternal, but the earth, water, fire, air, ether, and so forth. But the body itself not only is changing all the time, but also it will disappear. Right? So therefore, one gives much more importance to the soul than to the body. Therefore, this has far-reaching consequences. For example, in the Vedic tradition, one downsizes the needs of the body, and so that they can maximize service to the soul and service to God. So, therefore, and by the way, when you downsize the needs of the body, you live much more happily. You don't have a complicated life. And you can think more clearly about how to liberate your soul from this temporary body and go back to the spiritual world in your original spiritual body. Okay, so you can understand how people can misunderstand this statement, the non-existence of the material body. Obviously, there is a temporary existence in the material body, but it's always changing. So previously it says, the material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. So something that only exists for 50, 60, or 100 years compared to the eternal soul, there's no comparison. Right? Therefore, for the short period of time that we're entrapped in a particular body, especially the human body, we should use all the facilities of the human body, meaning the five senses, the sixth sense, the mind, the intelligence, and so forth, in the service of God. It's only a short period of time, maximum 100 years. But if we waste that 100 years in watching television, talking nonsense, smoking marijuana, whatever, that's like a criminal behavior. You're denying yourself the opportunity to attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And that is the greatest waste of human potential. But because we're dumbed down by modern philosophy and material education, we actually think that death, old age, and disease is normal. It's just part of life. And it's not. It's abnormal. It's not relative to our soul. But we become conditioned by ignorance to think this is just life. Of course, everyone's trying to overcome old age, disease, and death, but even the greatest scientists, they also get old and die, even though they're promising you one day they'll solve the riddle of death. Yeah. Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll go on to the next verse, 29. Okay, can we repeat? Ascharyavat pasyati kaschid enam. Acharyavat vadadita taivachanya. Askaryavat chainyam anna. Shrinoti. Shudvat enam vedana chaiva kaschid. Acharyavat. As amazing. Pasyati. Sees. Kaschit. Someone. Enam. This soul. Ascharyavat. That's amazing. Vadati. Speaks of.
speaks of
tata,
tata,
thus,
thus,
eva,
eva,
certainly,
certainly,
cha,
cha,
also,
also,
anya,
anya,
another,
another,
ascharyavat,
ascharyavat,
similarly,
similarly
similarly amazing,
similarly amazing,
cha,
cha,
also,
also,
enam,
enam,
this soul,
this soul,
anya,
anya,
another,
another,
shinoti,
shinoti,
hears of,
hears of,
shrutva,
shrutva,
having heard,
having heard,
api,
api,
even,
even,
enam,
enam,
this soul,
this soul,
veda,
Veda,
knows,
knows,
na,
na,
never,
never,
cha,
cha,
and
and
eva,
eva,
certainly,
certainly,
kaschit,
Question.
someone.
someone.
Translation. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing. And some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. So this is a fact. Very few people understand the difference between the body and the soul. And because of that, they spend most of their life just decorating the body and ignoring the needs of the soul. So, okay, who's going to read?
I can read that one.
Okay, good.
Since Gita Upanishad is largely based on the principles of the Upanishads, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad.
Go ahead, you don't have to read the section.
Okay. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. Men with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot understand the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge, who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe. Owing to a gross material conception of things, most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. So, men look at the soul proper as wonderful either by constitution or by description. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in subject matters for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self-understanding, all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Some people who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance of the super soul and the atomic soul as one without distinction of magnitude. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the position of the super soul, the atomic soul, their respective functions and relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from the knowledge of the soul, and who is able to describe the position of the soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of the Bhagavad Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones, before one is able to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna can, however, be known as such by the causeless mercy of the pure devotee and by no other way.
Okay, so we see that knowledge of the soul is a very rare thing, although the beginning of spiritual life is understanding the difference between the soul and the body. So this is the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna is confused and Krishna is beginning to unravel his confusion, and he does that by explaining the difference in the body and the soul. Like traditionally in Hinduism, if a member of a family dies, after the funeral, for 1 week, the members of the deceased the living members of the deceased, sit down and hear traditionally the Garuda Purana. Garuda Purana explains the process of death and what happens after death, and goes into a deep explanation of the laws of karma and the purpose of purification of consciousness in preparation for death, so that one does not take birth again. So this is a essential subject, because nobody likes to get old, get sick, and die. And if we become illusioned by false knowledge and think that, well, I don't like it, but it's just life, so I have to accept it, then we won't do anything to get out of this dilemma called samsara, repeated birth and death. But if we understand that our real nature is eternal, and we have an eternal soul, but as long as we're illusioned to be attached to the body and chase after the pleasures of the body, we miss the opportunity in this human form of life of attaining liberation from this whole cycle of birth and death. So we see how it's very inimical to be transfixed on sense gratification. If you look at a cat, you'll see that the cat's living in the house, just like the owner of the house, the wife, and the kids are living in the house. But the cat learns to enjoy the house even more than the members of the family. It has a place where it can poop, right? It has a place where it can eat. The cat will find, on a sunny day, a nice place on the sofa where the sun is coming in through the window. It'll go right there and get a sunbath. Right? When the family members come, the cat will come and rub the leg of the one member and go purr for another member. In other words, they know how to play with the people in the house to get favors from them. And they'll all pet the cat, and sometimes they let the cat sleep in the same bed with them because the cat's soft hair and so forth. So you see, the cat has become actually the owner of the house. The cat spends all day in the house, right? The other people have to go out and work. The cat's just lazing around the house, sunbathing, pooping, eating, doing nonsense, and running around playing. So the cat is completely engaged in sense gratification. That's its only thought: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Whereas people are trying to do the eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, but they also have to work hard to maintain it. The cat doesn't have to work hard at all. It's being kept there as a... So is there any difference between a person who is attached to sense gratification and the cat? No, there's no difference. They're not doing anything different. They're both just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's their preoccupation. Now, the person may have more advanced techniques of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending than the cat. But the description of their life is the same. There's not very much difference between the two. This is all because of the illusory nature of sense gratification. The senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the skin, are highly developed. In nature, usually animals, insects, and so forth only have one highly developed sense. And that's enough to get them killed. Like, for example, a moth has big eyes. It's light sensitive. So when it sees a fire at night or an electric light bulb in the dark, they're attracted to it. and they fly around it, and finally they get a little too close. It singes their wings, because their wings are very delicate, and then they die. And the fish is a highly developed taste bud. So whenever it sees something that looks tasty, like an artificial Chinese fish hook, which is highly decorated, it catches their eye, and then they want to eat. It looks like a smaller fish than them, so they go and they bite it, and they get hooked, and they're dead. Because the fish, if you look at them in the water, they're always opening and closing their mouth like this. I don't know if you've ever looked at the fish, right? Because they're always tasting something. So that causes their death. And so it's the moth, the fish, and then you have the deer. Deer have highly sensitive ears, and they can hear sounds that we can't hear, and from far away. And as soon as they hear something, immediately their ears go up and they start twitching and they start looking around. So hunters, they have what's called a deer horn. You can buy them in hunting shops. And it makes a sound like a female deer. And so the hunters hide behind a tree and blow on the horn. Make that sort of sound, And if they're patient, a big buck deer will come looking for the female. But there's no female, it's the hunter. And the hunter carefully takes aim and shoots it, kills it. That's the way they hunt. So and then the elephant, just like many other animals, goes into heat at certain times, maybe once a year. And he's looking for the she-elephant. So there's different ways they catch the elephant. One way is they'll make a big hole and then cover it with grass. And on the other side of that big hole, they tie up a female elephant. Or they tie a facsimile of a female elephant. Right? Facsimile means something that looks like an elephant but isn't. But usually they'll tie a real female elephant. And she'll call out, and the male elephant will think, oh, here's my mate. And he'll go toward the female, and he gets really excited as he gets closer, and he falls into the hole, and they catch him. So what they'll do is they'll starve him for some time until he gets a little weak, and then they can control him better when he's weaker. And eventually they get him out of the hole, and they do different things to train the elephant after that into captivity. Okay, so you have the elephant, you have the deer, you have the moth or the butterfly, and the fish. And there's one more, let's see. Fish is the taste bud. Smell, yeah. Bees. The bee is always attracted to the pollen. But there are certain plants that are carnivorous. You know what that means, carnivorous? You know what that means? It means that these are plants that eat meat. Carn is a Latin word meaning flesh. So, sometimes bees will get intoxicated by getting pollen, and they'll linger a little too long in some of these flowers. There are different types of flowers, but there are certain types of flowers that are open and are very attractive. And when a bee or a bug lands in it, it closes on it and kills it and consumes it. So they get caught by their smell. So these animals or these insects, they only have one highly developed sense. How many highly developed senses does a person have?
Five.
5. All of them are highly developed. Right? Now, an insect or an animal has one highly developed sense. It usually, gets killed by it, right? We have 5. Right? So the example given is there was a man who had 5 wives. And he would go to work, and the wives would be waiting for him all day. And when he'd come back, and you open the door, and they would all be there to greet him, and each one would grab one part of his body and pull it this way or that way, because they all wanted to have his association. So as soon as he'd open the door, one would grab the right leg, another one the left leg, one would grab the left arm, the other one right arm, one would just grab his nose, and they would just pull him to their side of the house or whatever. So, do you think he ever got anything done as soon as he came home? No. He was being pulled in all these 5 directions. He was like paralyzed, couldn't do anything. So that's what happens when the mind becomes attracted to objects of the senses. Now, the other day we learned that the objects of the senses are superior to the senses, and the senses are superior to dull matter. And above the objects of the senses is the mind, and above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul. So now we see how the objects of the senses are more powerful than the senses themselves. That means, like for example, if you see something that you like, it can completely seize your whole orientation in life, and the way you do things and the way you think. And it can, like for example, let's say a young boy wants a remote control car, and his parents refuse to buy it for him, and all his friends have remote control cars, and so he becomes obsessed with getting one. Or like when they came out with the spinner, right? So one kid sees another kid with a spinner, and immediately he wants it. Right? And then they came out with different model spinners, one is more elaborate than the other. So then the kids become experts on the different types of spinners. Am I saying the right thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see, one becomes affixed or transfixed on this object of the senses, and it seizes the way they think, dream, desire, and so forth. And it can be food, it can be an object like a spinner, it can be a car, it can be another person, it can be a place, it can be a concept. And as long as there is a desire to exploit, own, control, and enjoy, our mind becomes agitated. We're not in a normal state. Now, when people are too materially agitated or mentally agitated, then it drives them crazy. It's called an obsessive mind. It drives them crazy. Then they have to take some drugs to calm them down. They'll go to the doctor, and the doctor will see that they're very, very agitated, so they'll give them drugs. Then they get addicted to the drugs, and that's called opioid. In America, you have an opioid epidemic. Almost 50% of the population in the United States takes some kind of drug for stress. That they're stressed out because they want something and they can't get it. And eventually it drives them, it makes them very agitated, and therefore they can't function if they're always agitated. So they have to take something to calm them down. So here we see that you can hear about the soul, you can read about the soul, you can study about the soul. But as long as one is attached to sense gratification, one can never really understand the existence of the soul. And it says here, men with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot understand the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge, who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe. Owing to a gross material conception of things, most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. Okay, so I've asked this question before, I'll ask it again. Is the soul of an elephant the same size or bigger than the soul of a human being? Is the soul of an ant the same size, bigger or smaller than the elephant's soul? What size is it?
100,000 of a tip of hair. 10,000 or the 100,000?
1/10,000.
1/10,000. Okay.
So, can you measure it though? I mean, you know what the measure is. Could you actually physically do it? No. So it's something you can't see. But yet, it exists. Now how do we know there's a soul in the body?
Presence of consciousness.
Consciousness.
Consciousness, yes. As soon as a person dies, there's no more consciousness in the body. Is consciousness a combination of material elements?
No.
If it was, then you could bring the body back to life. You'd analyze it chemically or before death, and then you'd analyze it after death, and you'd see what chemicals are missing. And you just inject the chemicals, it should come back to life. But it doesn't work like that. So therefore, the soul is not a material thing. And when the body no longer has a soul in it, it disintegrates. Okay. So even though one can hear about the soul, attend lectures on the soul, and even be in the association of people who believe in the soul, but owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance. Okay, so if you think that by doing yoga or some kind of spiritual practice, you can become God, is that possible?
No.
No, it's not possible. But there's a whole class of philosophers that think that's possible. They're called Mayavadis, impersonalists. They think that there's only one soul, one universal soul, and individuality is that we see. You're an individual, everyone is an individual. They think that is actually an illusion. There's only one homogeneous, universal individual, which they call Brahman, or the Brahmajyoti, and that all the other individuality that we see in the world is an illusion, it's not real. And they give examples like, if there's a bubble of air under the water, as it rises to the surface, it seems to have an individual existence. When it reaches the surface, it bursts and merges into the totality of the air. So they give that example to prove that there's only actually one soul, and that individuality we see is illusory. Just like we think that this is a particular bubble of air in the water, but as soon as it hits the air, it merges into the totality of the air. That, of course, is a false philosophy. Okay. Any questions? And then we'll go to verse 30. So, Dehi nityam avadyoyam
Dehi nityam avadyoyam
Dehe sarvasya bharata
Dehi sarvasya bharata
Tasmat sarvani bhutani
Tasmat sarvani bhutani
Natvam sochitam arhati.
Natvam sochitam arhasi
I'm sorry, Natvam sochitam arhasi.
Natvam sochitam arhasi.
O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any living being. So, many times in this section of the second chapter, Krishna has affirmed that the soul is eternal. It's never born, never dies. You can't kill it. You can't cut it. Basically, it is immutable, meaning it's unchangeable. It eternally exists. And it is uniquely individual. So every person has an individual soul. And Krishna, we are all tied to Krishna, or we're all connected to Krishna. Any idea that we are independent of Krishna or God is an illusion. At every step of life we depend on the help of God to get things done. And we're never really separated from God. So the whole atheistic idea that claims that there's no God and that man exists independent in this world, it's a false philosophy. It's not a fact. No one can exist independent of God. And we know that because, for example, every fundamental function of our body that for sustaining life is out of our control. We don't control the breathing, we don't control the heartbeat, we don't control the digestion, we don't control oxidation, this thing, that, all these different processes that are going on. We don't control it, we don't understand how it's happening, and but yet it's happening, and our life depends on it. We don't control the movement of the planets, we don't control the changing of the seasons, we don't control the sun, but yet, without these things, we wouldn't be able to live. So whether it's on the microscopic level of metabolic enzymes or oxygenating enzymes or digestive enzymes or metabolism, all these things, we're not controlling them. But yet our life depends on it. So therefore, we can understand we're dependent. Any philosophy, like for example, atheistic existential philosophy, is an illusion. They claim that there's no God and that man exists in this world, and it's a hostile world. But with science and logic, we can overcome nature's hostility. No, it's another foolish philosophy. So, what keeps us bound up to the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease are misconceptions. And usually, people with PhDs, they write entire books based on misconceptions, their own speculations. The more they speculate, the more we think they're brilliant. But actually, it's the opposite. The more they speculate, the more ridiculous they are. There's a new guy now, his name is Jonah Goldberg. He's written a book about how great America is and how great achievements have taken place in the last 200 years due to science. And so, anyway, we're not here to bash America, but he claims that this is the greatest time in all human civilization, that capitalism has given more wealth than ever before to the common man. Well, it may once one way to interpret life, but yet there are many people who disagree with that. They're the ones who are not capitalists, they're just common workers, and they work really hard and they don't get a lot of money. So, yeah, maybe there are a lot of people who are making more money, but there's still many more people who don't make as much money, whose life is not as privileged, who don't have a lot of education. So, how do you balance this? Well, you can see that the more prosperous Seattle becomes, the more homeless people there are. Right? And there's no real solution to the homelessness. In fact, there's pictures just yesterday of homeless people shooting up drugs in public in the BART system. BART is the subway system in San Francisco. They're just sitting there all day long, taking drugs, sleeping, defecating, throwing up, and people are walking by, and they feel sorry for them. There's nothing they can do. And you can't really stop a person from destroying himself like that. So we see this anomaly that the more the country becomes prosperous, the more homeless people there. And it doesn't make sense. Why would, well, but on the other hand, it does make sense. Some people who are not educated properly, or who might have some education, but are not able to get a job for different reasons, and they can't pay rent, so they end up being homeless. Now, what is the solution to this? The solution is to stop speculating about life and go back to traditional knowledge. Traditional knowledge says there's a God, we're all God's children, and there are rules and regulations that if we abide by, then we'll easily be able to make ends meet in life, and we'll be happy and we'll have psychological stability. So that's explained in Bhagavad Gita. If we look in the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, 3rd chapter, verse number 10. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, "Be thou happy by this sacrifice," or yajna, "because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation." So here's a plan of God. We can live happily and achieve liberation at the end of life. Right? How is that? And if we look in the purport, near the end of the first paragraph, it says, "The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform sacrifices for the satisfaction of Vishnu, or God, so that while in the material world they can live very comfortably without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body they can enter into the kingdom of God." That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of sacrifice, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan, the Kali is the present age of hypocrisy and quarrel. The Sankirtan Yajna, the chanting of the holy names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Chaitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan Yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna, in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya, is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan Yajna, or the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. In the age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yajna. Other yajnas or sacrifices prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan Yajna is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended in Bhagavad Gita, also 9:14. So Sankirtan means congregational chanting of the names of God. The name of God and God himself are non-different. When we chant the name of God, we're directly associated with God himself. That's the definition of the meaning of absolute. Everything about God is absolute. His name is also absolute. Coca-Cola is not absolute. Therefore, you can chant the name Coca-Cola all day long. You will not really taste Coca-Cola. But if you chant the name of Krishna, you will actually feel and taste and hear his presence. Okay, so if we perform the sacrifice, recommended sacrifice for this age, which is chanting the holy names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, then we will be able to live very simply and comfortably, and at the end of life, we'll go back to God. Nothing can be more simpler than that. You don't have to be a rocket engineer to do this. Therefore, here it says that the Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on the immutable spirit soul. So, this is the second chapter, verse 30. Krishna is explaining the eternality of this soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher, Bhisma and Drona, will die in the battlefield. On the authority of Lord Krishna, one has to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such thing as soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity, resulting from the interaction of chemicals. Though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the same time war is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. So here Krishna is saying the soul is not something that develops at a certain mature state of material combination. And we've mentioned this before. This was Turing's idea. Turing was the father of the computer. 1950, he said that eventually we'll be able to make computers more and more performant, and they will equal human consciousness. And if there is a soul, then eventually by the development of artificial intelligence, etc., we will also produce a soul. He said, this is complete nonsense. However, so he said that in 1950, so today is 2008, 2018, so this is 68 years since Turing made his prediction. Do you think his prediction is going to come true? In other words, he's saying through more and more computer advancement in computer science, eventually the soul will be created. No.
A likeness.
Well,
That is and that will be, yet it's not the same.
yes, of course. But the soul is something that's eternal. If you combine material elements together, or chemicals, or atoms together, can you create something that'll be eternal? The atoms themselves are eternal, but the forms that you make with them are not eternal. That's the point. And you can make a robot that looks like a person, that can even talk a little bit like a person. But like a car, the robot will end up in a junkyard eventually.
The likeness is best recognized as in looking in the water or a mirror. It is so perfectly exact for what God has created, yet any way you look at it, you take the real thing away, the mirror is no longer. It's so simple, it's almost complicated.
Well, you can, like for example, you can look at yourself in a mirror. Can the mirror image of you shake somebody's hand? If someone can shake your hand, can you shake the hand of your image in the mirror? No. So, like you said, the likeness is different than the real thing. But through through the development of artificial intelligence, scientists are promising that the robot will be almost exactly like a real person, and they'll download the mind of the real person into the software of a robot, and you'll live eternally like that until Igor Masevich in Belarus hacks your robot, and then you'll be in the junkyard. So, trust no future, however bright. So here Prabhupada says, though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war it is not discouraged, when there is actual need for it. So in this chapter, we've already discussed previously, sometimes violence is necessary, but it should be the absolute last resort. but sometimes you can't avoid it. And you can see, like, there was this one husband and wife, they were on a vacation driving from California to somewhere in New Mexico, and they stayed overnight in a motel. And while they're together in the motel, a thief entered with a gun. Now it so happened that this lady's husband was a decorated war hero, right? I think from Vietnam War, and he had a gun, but the thief didn't know that. So at one point, he said, "Look, I have some money in my jacket. Can I just get it and I'll give it to you?" And Steve said, "Be very careful, don't make any funny moves." So he had the gun pointed at him. So he went into his jacket and fumbled around a little bit. He pulled out a gun, right? So the thief shot him first, hit him right in the chest. Fortunately, it didn't hit his heart. And then he killed the thief with his gun. Now he was seriously wounded. He went to the hospital. And in the hospital, the man's wife said, "My husband is a hero. He's already a decorated war hero. Now he showed himself to be even more of a hero by saving my life." And of course he didn't die. He was just severely wounded. So, did the thief know that this man was a decorated war hero and that he had a gun? No, he didn't know. And he thought this is going to be an easy job, go in there with a gun, scare the heck out of them, and take their money and go away. So sometimes violence is necessary. And if we think, no, we can be nonviolent and everything will be all right, it's not true. But it should be a last resort. And there's nothing wrong with being trained to be able to use a gun or for self-defense. There's nothing wrong about it. Ultimately, Krishna is our protector. But in the case of Arjuna, you see, he's a trained warrior, and he's refusing to fight because of family attachment. So that is a complete, let's say, travesty of duty. Therefore, Krishna is trying to convince him to fight, and he does in the end. Okay, so next we'll read this and then we'll discuss a little bit and then we'll finish. Swadharmam apichaveksya na vikampitam arhasi dharmyati yudyat shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, warrior, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there's no need for hesitation. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Who's going to read? Arush. Okay, you read the verse again. Read the verse. Considering.
The translation.
Yeah.
Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for
Hesitation. Very good. Okay, who's going to read the purport? Anyone?
I can read.
Go ahead.
Okay. Out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called Kshatriya. Shat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya. The Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyasa or renunciation. Non-violence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated, in the battlefield, a king or Kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving heavenly planets after death, as the Brahmanas also attend the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire.
So, heavenly planets does not mean the spiritual world. It means higher planets in the material world. Right. Go ahead.
Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved.
Of course, today, animal sacrifice in this age is not permitted anymore because you will not find priests or brahmanas who are qualified to do it. What is the qualification? The qualification is that you must be able to bring the animal back to life after the sacrifice. If you can't do that, then you're not allowed to do it. And in this age, no brahmanas are able to do that.
The animal sacrificed gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another, and the Kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attend the heavenly planets as do the Brahmanas who attend them by offering sacrifice. There are two kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnashrama Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashrama Dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life.
So swadharma is duties that one performs based on their acquired nature. How do you acquire a certain nature? It's through association with the modes of material nature. Modes of material nature are goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, someone who hangs out in a bar, just like you can go to major cities like New York and Los Angeles, and bars stay open sometimes till, according to law, till 4 o'clock in the morning in the major cities. And there's some bars that are open 24 hours a day. Just like casinos are open 24 hours. Right? So there are people that hang out in these places. Like gamblers, sometimes they'll gamble 3-4 days in a row, 24 hours. They don't go to sleep, they just keep gambling. And or they go to a bar every night and stay there for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, talking nonsense, drinking, smoking, gambling, and so forth. So you acquire a certain nature by that association or that environment. Right? So devotees, they are always trying to stay in the mode of goodness, not going into bars, not going to casinos, not gambling, not eating meat, not intoxicating, not engaged in illicit activities. So they develop the nature of goodness, or sattva guna. And then people who are very materially inclined, businessmen, they're always engaged in some kind of business deal. And they're always talking about, oh, I bought it at this price, and I'm going to sell it at that price, etc. So that's another nature that they develop. It's the nature of passion. They're very active, but always active for self-aggrandizement and self-indulgence. And then there's the mode of ignorance, that's hanging out in the bar, hanging out in the casino, gambling, intoxicating, sleeping, being lazy, being unclean, and so forth. So when one is in the lower swadharma, or lower nature, they're still attached to the material body, but they're willing to rise up gradually by following regulative principles of spiritual, of what you call varnashram dharma. So those principles regulate the functions of the body and the mind according to, let's say, prescribed duties. Then they are gradually elevated to the point of the higher swadharma. The higher swadharma is at first in the mode of goodness, and then later on in the transcendental goodness, where they're liberated completely from all attraction to the material world. The higher swadharma gives a person complete peace, happiness, and the possibility of attaining love and knowledge. So, unless we can organize society to elevate people from the lower modes of ignorance, passion, to goodness, and then the transcendental goodness, society remains a failure. And you can see the worst failures are the homeless people. But the other people are not much better than them. The homeless person is living on the street, the others are living in nice houses. But their functions are the same: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Homeless person is defecating in the street, and the other people have nice toilets and nice showers. But the goal of life is the same: sense gratification. Yes.
What does defecating mean?
Passing stool. Yeah. Did you know that bats pass stool through their mouth? Bats. You know what a bat is?
Yeah.
They eat with their mouth and they pass stool through their mouth. Did you know that? You learned that today. When you read the Bhagavatam, you learn a lot about nature. You know, more so than if you just read normal books. Yeah. Okay, so human civilization begins from the stage of varnashram dharma. That means human civilization begins when we accept the rules and regulations as set down by the Vedic scriptures. That is, 4 don'ts, 4 do's. No meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit activities outside of marriage. Always chanting the name of God. Always discussing the word of God, like Bhagavad Gita, as we're doing now. Always eat only sanctified food, food offered with love and devotion to Krishna, and mainly vegetarian food. And then number 4, regularly doing service in the association of devotees in the temple. Right? So 4 don'ts, 4 do's. If you follow those 4 regulative principles, then you rise up very quickly to the mode of transcendental goodness, where there's no longer any karmic reaction for our activities. And we're basically in a state of liberation, even in this world. Liberation from misconceptions of life. What binds us to the material world are misconceptions about the purpose of life. Somebody thinks the purpose of life is making money. Somebody thinks the purpose of life is exploiting others. Somebody thinks the purpose of life is just making, acquiring mundane knowledge. Someone thinks the purpose of life is playing baseball. Okay, so as long as one harbors even one misconception, they cannot attain self-realization or love of God. Okay, any discussion? Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
So Prabhuji, then when Swadharma and Swabhava, so Prabhuji, basically, why does an instability come? If little trouble comes or something happens?
Why does instability come? Why does trouble come? Is that what-
Instability.
Why do people have an agitated mind?
Yeah, I mean, why it's not fixed, Swadharma and Swabhava? Why can't it be fixed? If you're associating, if you're doing, then why? Yeah.
Well, we say that you acquire the lower swadharma, or lower nature, by associating with the modes of material nature, especially the modes of passion and ignorance. So, why don't you map out your 24 hours? Already, if you sleep 8 hours, you're in the mode of ignorance. And if you go to work, you're in the mode of passion. So how many hours is that? 8 and 8? 8 and 10. So let's say 10 hours work, 8 hours sleep, 18 hours. Now there's only 6 hours left. You spend 18 hours, 8 hours in the mode of ignorance, 8 hours in the mode of passion. So if you come home and watch television for 2 hours, normally most kids spend on average 3 hours a day watching television. Yeah. How much you watch television?
Not that much. Like usually we watch.
How much?
Like we watch like an hour per week.
An hour a week?
Yeah.
Is that right? Hour a week? Is that right?
Yeah, it's not much.
So 10 minutes a day.
Like less. Like just we do.
Only when like sitting together while eating because they take time.
While eating?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the only time.
Okay. Well, anyway, on the average in America, kids watch television 3 hours a day.
Every day, 7 days.
That's what I heard, and maybe I'm wrong.
No, that's average.
Sounds
Yes,
small
sir.
to me.
Small. More.
The normal American household doesn't parent. The TV does.
Okay. That's true.
And that's become a socially deteriorating result with the morality and the development of the, as many would describe, the new age. When there was so little, when there weren't TVs, when children would come home and mom and dad had to give them chores to do or something to give them purpose, we didn't have the problem that we have socially now, where the children are killing their parents so much and so on and so forth. It's kind of a repulsive fact. America, the land of the free and the beautiful. For those of you that have families elsewhere, I bet you have a much more embraced love within the family of the youngsters growing up, taking care of the old, and so much of it. In America, from what I know, the last 120 years, we haven't gotten better.
Well, okay. So 8 hours in ignorance, 10 hours in passion, and then if you spend time watching television, going on the internet, talking on the cell phone.
Cell phone, that's also passion.
Well, what are you saying on the phone? You tell me. What is the subject on the phone? You're you're talking to your team in India, right? Or you're talking to, maybe you're on call, 24-hour call for 1 or 2 days a week. You know, I mean, it's basically hardly any time at all for association in the mode of goodness.
Oh, yes.
So now you understand the origin of an agitated mind. Okay, that answers the question?
Thank you, Prabhuji, very nicely.
Yes. Okay. So human civilization begins from the stage of Varna Shrama Dharmas. Varna means social order. Intellectuals, administrators, businessmen, workers. That's Varnas. And then ashramas means celibate student, holy marriage, gradual renunciation, husband and wife together, and later total renunciation. So that's called Varna Ashrama, the social orders and the spiritual orders of life. So all those orders of life regulate human activity. Regulation is the basis of advanced life. And irregulation is the cause of sickness and disorder in one's life. Eating at different times, sleeping at different times, just irregulated habits. Okay, so when we regulate ourselves for spiritual advancement or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. So one who has the nature of goodness has specific duties to perform. Right? And one who is in mode of passion has specific duties to perform. And one who is in mode of ignorance has specific duties to perform to elevate themselves. So you can take, like for example, Narada Muni was born the son of a maidservant. No education, mother was very poor. He became the greatest saint in the history of the world by associating with saintly persons. On the other hand, you have Ravana, who's the son of a Brahmana, right, who was the most degraded person because of bad association. So, tell me who your friends are, I tell you who you are. Tell me what your schedule is during the day, and we can do a modes of material nature chart. How many hours in a mode of goodness, how many hours in a mode of passion, how many hours in a mode of ignorance. So if you have most of the time in a mode of ignorance and passion, then you're not going to evolve very much. Maybe a little bit, but not much. The whole idea of the Aryan or Aryan civilization is organizing the whole society for spiritual advancement, for remembering God at every step, for developing one's faith in God, for becoming eligible to go back to the kingdom of God. That's the whole purpose of that type of civilization. Now today's civilization, whether it's in the West or the East, is organized mainly for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's it.
In our own kingdoms,
Yeah.
like whatever people is trying to make, like we make it more luxurious place and this kingdom.
Yeah, man is king
Yeah.
of his house.
Yes.
Okay. So, therefore, we covered some the aspects of the eternality of the soul, and then eventually coming to regulated life to develop a higher swabhava, or higher nature, or natural psychological orientation of life. Yes?
So, Prabhuji, I really like this depiction of highly developed senses. It's really eye-opener. So, I had a question, because we, like, even though we have 5 senses, so there are 5 possible chances of getting agitated and getting into the trap of senses. If we had only one sense highly developed, that would have actually helped. So why still these
No, it wouldn't help.
wouldn't help?
See,
Because
no,
lower
no.
species, then why can't they focus? Because they have only one issue. Okay, they, let's say, fish only has mouth issues. If she can somehow control the mouth, then
No,
she's
see,
okay.
the lower species cannot regulate the functions of the senses for spiritual advancement. They can only use the senses for sense gratification. Only the human form is specifically meant for self-realization, for knowing oneself in relationship with God. The other species are not capable of doing that. They're capable, like for example, the eagle has better eyes than we do. The eagle can spot a prey 2 miles away. That's how sharp the eyes of the eagle are. I can't even see 100 feet or 200 feet away, right? The eagle can see 200 feet away. And certain animals' hearing is much sharper than our hearing. They can hear wavelengths of sound, a much bigger broadband of wavelengths of sound than we can. So animals have highly developed senses, right? But usually one. We have 5 highly developed senses. So it's very easy for us to be attracted to something and lose control of the mind. And this is explained in the 2nd chapter. We read this the other day. We'll read it again. Yatatohi apikonteya purusasya vipassataha. Second, just find that verse. Indriyani pramatini haranti pashavam manak, 2nd chapter, 60th verse. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So we say that the body is a place of ignorance and the senses are a network of paths to death. Of all the senses, we are trapped in this ocean of material sense gratification. Of all the senses, the tongue is